Hi guys! Exclamation point. I recently read an article on PC Gamer titled There's a Future Where You and Your Graphics Card Decide What a Game Looks Like, Not the Developers. Talking about how AI would be able to change the graphical style in a game to your liking instead of keeping the developer's vision. This way of thinking really worries me as a developer, and I was wondering what your thoughts are about this. Is this really what the players want? Now, Oliver, you keep a track of all of this AI stuff.
Yes,
It was a contentious article. What do you think of it?
it was. So I do have some thoughts on this. My first point is that it's really not likely to take this form or a form similar to this in the near future. Because if you look at the processing requirements of video generation, AI video generation, they're extremely intense. The level of temporal cohesion is not really there. The level of resolution is not really there in terms of the detail that it's resolving. I think the much more likely thing that we're going to see with similar ish technology is something more like DLSS ray reconstruction, possibly something that slots in as a post process. So, like, you could imagine an AI trained on like indirect lighting handling ambient occlusion in much the same way that we, currently inject ambient occlusion using tools like Reshade, that handles things like complex geometry well, has good temporal consistency, has some understanding of things that go off screen, for instance, possibly with this AI ambient occlusion technique that I'm just hypothesizing here. And in that context, with something that's a little bit more gradual and could possibly run in real time for a game, could possibly run with acceptable latency, and could possibly actually operate in the context of a real time renderer, is it that much of an abrogation of the developer intent to improve lighting quality a bit or make these alterations to a game that aren't really that different from injecting SSAO or FXA into an older title? And of course, that original version of the game still exists. So I would really say that it's more likely to be in the direction of something much more gradual in the short term. I don't think we're going to see anything like this in the short term in real time rendering. My second point is that even that more expansive AI overhaul that you might see at some point in the more distant future, to me, it does not seem like anything that's fundamentally that different from something like Doom Path Traced. And I guess the question is, do you see that as disrespectful? Like, do you think an id Software employee would look at that and say, that's really disrespectful and I'm upset at that concept? Or is it an interesting spin on an older title, right? That's kind of a difference of taste. And I think in the end, it is a matter of taste. And that PC Gamer article had somewhat less tasteful revisions to the artwork of Bioshock Infinite, redoing it in a totally different style and not portraying it in such a faithful way, and also not looking that great. But if you did have something that's closer to that original art, that is more conservative, more tasteful, maybe actually uses the original concept art or digital illustrations or 3D CG content from a game like that, depending on the title, uses that as inputs to give it a closer match to that original vision. I know it's controversial in the here and now, but I could totally see that as something that we're looking at in 10 years and saying this is a normal part of life, of modifying older games. And of course, that older version of the game is still there. And I will admit, I did feature something quite similar to this using more primitive AI video generation technologies in a video about a year and a half ago. But I did feel like that was a glimpse of a more distant future and not something that we'll see as a functional enhancement to games in the next few years. And ultimately, I do think like this, obviously this is very controversial, but I think it comes down to a matter of taste and how faithful you are being to that original title, and also how gradual you're being to that original title. Like I was looking at, there are modifications now, I guess, for a title like Metaphor ReFantazio that are trying to add TAA and things like that. Is, on some level you have to say, is this a failing of that original work, that maybe some of the lighting quality or some of the asset quality or things like this, that they were primitive at that time, or that there are technical problems in games? Like, to what extent is making modifications like this to try to overcome some of those areas, is that trying to violate the original artistic intent of a game, or is that just trying to improve it in a new and interesting way? I think that's probably a balance that people are going to have to strike. I think it's a hard thing to strike, especially with some of these technologies that might be quite powerful in the future. But for now, I don't really think it's in that category. So kind of a bit of a mixed answer there, but that's my overall perspective on it at the moment.
John, what do you think?
Wow, I don't really have much else to add to that, Oliver. That was beautifully covered. So, and I kind of agree, and it is. I think the current scenario that was played out isn't really feasible as you suggested, and it's almost just like designed to be like a news post to like shock people and make them upset. Or it's like, look at this insane thing that you can do. AI is going to do this. It's like no, that's not a thing, and it's not going to be a thing anytime soon. And even modifying visuals in any way, as you said, it's not that different from like injecting, sweet FX into your PC games or, these path tracing mods. It's just something to fiddle with, and it doesn't erase the original vision. So I think there's use for this stuff in there to mess with graphics. And as long as graphics have been rasterized or drawn onto computer screens, people have been messing with them and modding them and toying around with what's possible. And this is just another facet of that. It's just that what PC Gamer's trying to propose here is not really anything that I foresee anytime soon. And even then, I don't know. It's a weird situation. But yeah, Oliver got it right.
I do recall when Alex and I met with Tom Peterson from Intel to discuss Intel Arc, and we were talking about some of the potential applications of AI, the concept of essentially changing the style of a game's graphics did come up. But I do believe that you're probably right. It would be some sort of post-process or reshade style take on it. I don't think it would be something that should worry a developer as such, because, well, ultimately the developer is still required for the core visuals, right? It's just that it's going to be a mod. I think, when I first saw this PC Gamer headline, I actually sort of, in my mind, just changed that headline to be, there's a future where the games journalism that you read is going to be decided by an AI, not journalists. And that particular future is far more likely to happen than the graphics option that's being put down here. But, when it comes to making posts on X, basically, I self-edit about 95% of the things I want to say. Just in the end, just don't write it at all. but that's basically,
Yeah, I'd also come around to what we have today with Reshade. I can put in a couple of Reshade plugins and make any game look totally tasteless right now. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I can do that right now. Or I can do something more tasteful. I can add FXA, I can add SSAO. Maybe in the future we'll be talking about I'm running Sora Model 3 real time on this, and I'm using these as inputs, and here's the result I'm getting, versus here's the result I'm getting, versus I'm running the original game, but maybe I'm using RTX Remix 3 on it or something. I think this is probably going to be part of the future. And I think that probably at some point we'll come to accept this as a viable way to, to take a look at older games. And I think we are already with RTX Remix and with various post-process injections. I don't think it's that different categorically from what is being proposed here, although I do think the examples that he used were maybe a little bit inflammatory and possibly a little tasteless.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about Microsoft Auto SR, which is effectively a AI post-process on an existing game frame. And, the model there is about upscaling, but I'm curious as to whether the model could be, okay, I want an anime version of this frame. I think that probably we will be seeing stuff like that, but I don't think it's going to be as sort of destructive to developers in that sense as potentially other applications of AI.